It was 11:34 p.m. when Jessica Hartman heard the sound that would change everything. Not the crash of breaking glass or the slam of a forced door, but something far more terrifying. The quiet, deliberate click of her back door lock disengaging. The kind of sound that meant someone had a key or knew exactly how to pick one. She froze in her bed, laptop still open on her chest. Netflix paused mid-scene and listened as every survival instinct in her body screamed that something was catastrophically wrong in her small ranch house on Maple Street in suburban Columbus, Ohio. Her husband Derek was in Atlanta for a 3-day conference, wouldn't be back until Thursday, and her nearest neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was elderly and half-deaf, probably already asleep behind thick curtains and locked doors. Jessica's phone sat on the nightstand. She reached for it slowly, fingers trembling, but before she could grab it, she heard footsteps in her kitchen, heavy and confident, the footsteps of someone who knew she was home and didn't care. Her breath caught in her throat, mind racing through impossible options. Hide in the closet, lock the bedroom door, climb out the window, scream for help that might never come. But then a voice cut through the darkness, cold and calm and absolutely certain. "Jessica, I know you're awake. I can see the light under your door. If you try to run, if you try to call anyone, I will hurt you in ways you cannot imagine. Come out slowly, hands where I can see them, and maybe you'll survive tonight." The voice was male, unfamiliar, and spoke with the practiced authority of someone who'd done this before, someone who knew exactly how fear worked, how it paralyzed, how it made smart people make fatal mistakes. Jessica's mind fragmented into 1,000 terrified thoughts. Who was this? How did he know her name? How long had he been planning this? What did he want? But underneath the panic, something else emerged, something colder and more calculating, the part of her brain that taught crisis management at Ohio State University, that had studied hostage situations and survival psychology, that knew the statistics. Victims who stayed calm, who cooperated initially, who looked for opportunities rather than making desperate moves, had significantly higher survival rates than those who panicked. So Jessica took a breath, steadied herself, and called back, "Okay, I'm coming out. Please don't hurt me." She opened the bedroom door slowly, hands raised, and saw him standing in her living room. Tall, maybe 6'2", wearing black jeans and a dark hoodie, surgical gloves on his hands, and most terrifying of all, a gun held loosely at his side, like an afterthought, like he didn't even need it to control her. His face was partially obscured by a black medical mask, but she could see his eyes, cold and analytical, studying her the way a scientist studies a specimen. "Sit on the couch," he ordered, gesturing with the gun. "Hands on your knees, don't move, don't speak unless I ask you a question." Jessica obeyed, lowering herself onto the leather couch Derek had bought last summer, the same couch where they'd watched movies and planned their future, and now it felt like a stage for her execution. The man moved through her house with unsettling familiarity, checking windows, drawing curtains, unplugging her landline, all while keeping the gun trained in her general direction. "Phone," he said, extending a gloved hand. Jessica hesitated. Her phone was her lifeline, her only connection to help, but the gun rose slightly, and she handed it over, watching as he powered it down and slipped it into his pocket. "Good," he said quietly. "Now we can talk." The next 3 hours became a surreal nightmare of psychological warfare. The man didn't touch her, didn't make threats beyond the implicit danger of the gun, but he talked, endlessly, obsessively about Jessica's life, her routines, her schedule. He knew Derek was in Atlanta, knew Jessica taught Tuesday and Thursday classes, knew she went to yoga at 6 p.m. on Mondays, knew her sister lived in Portland and called every Sunday. He'd been watching her for weeks, maybe months, learning her patterns, waiting for the perfect moment when she'd be completely alone and vulnerable. "Why are you doing this?" Jessica finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man tilted his head, considering the question. "Because I can," he said simply. "Because you left your garage door open last Tuesday for 45 minutes. Because you post your location on Instagram. Because you trust that the world is safe, and I'm here to teach you it's not." He paced slowly, gun still in hand, and Jessica's mind raced through everything she knew about hostage psychology. Establish rapport, humanize yourself, look for opportunities, never stop thinking. "What's your name?" she asked, trying to sound calm, trying to build some connection that might save her life. "Names don't matter," he replied. "What matters is that you understand how easy this was, how vulnerable you are, how no one's coming to save you." Outside, a car drove past, headlights briefly wash across the curtains, and Jessica's heart leapt. Maybe someone would notice, maybe a neighbor would see something wrong. But the car kept going, and silence returned like a suffocating blanket. The clock on the wall read 2:18 a.m., and Jessica realized with horrible clarity that she couldn't wait for rescue, couldn't hope that Derek would call and notice something wrong, couldn't rely on anything except her own ability to survive the next few hours. Then the man made his first mistake. He walked to her kitchen, still talking, still holding the gun, but his attention shifted for just a moment as he looked through her refrigerator, commenting on her grocery choices, her habits, her predictability. And in that instant, Jessica saw her opportunity. She'd noticed earlier that he'd placed her laptop on the coffee table, still open, still connected to Wi-Fi. And while her phone was gone, the laptop had a camera, had messaging apps, had a direct line to the outside world if she could just access it. But she needed a distraction, needed him focused elsewhere, needed to buy herself 30 seconds of unsupervised time. "I need to use the bathroom," she said suddenly. The man turned, eyes narrowing. "No." "Please," Jessica pressed, adding a tremor to her voice that wasn't entirely fake. "I'm going to be sick. I can't hold it." The man studied her for a long moment, then gestured toward the hallway. "Door stays open. You have 2 minutes. If I hear anything, a window opening, a phone, anything, I'm coming in, and this ends badly for you." Jessica nodded, stood slowly, and walked to the bathroom, acutely aware of his eyes on her back, of the gun pointed at her spine. She went inside, left the door open as instructed, and turned on the faucet, making noise to cover any sound she might make. Then she did something desperate and brilliant. She grabbed the bathroom window's curtain rod, yanked it hard enough to make a loud clattering sound, and immediately flushed the toilet, creating a cascade of noise. The man rushed down the hallway exactly as she'd hoped, pushing into the bathroom to see what she was doing, and in those precious seconds while he was focused on her, while he was away from the living room, Jessica had left her watch on the coffee table, a smartwatch connected to her laptop, and she'd activated Siri before going to the bathroom, giving it a delayed command: "Call 911 in 60 seconds." The man found her standing by the toilet, hands raised, the curtain rod on the floor, nothing else disturbed. "Window stuck," she lied. "I just wanted to see if I could open it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." He grabbed her arm roughly, dragged her back to the living room, threw her onto the couch with enough force to bruise, and that's when Jessica heard it, her laptop speaker activating, a voice saying, "Calling 911, please wait." The man's head snapped toward the coffee table, toward the laptop screen showing an outgoing emergency call, and his expression transformed from controlled menace to pure rage. "What did you do?" he snarled, raising the gun, and Jessica knew she had seconds before he either shot her or ran, seconds before everything either ended or changed forever. She dove sideways off the couch just as the gun fired, the bullet punching through the cushion where her head had been, and she scrambled on hands and knees toward the kitchen, toward the knife block she'd been eyeing all night, toward anything that might even the odds. The man was faster, catching her by the ankle, dragging her back, but Jessica twisted, kicked hard, her heel connecting with his wrist, and the gun clattered across the hardwood floor. They both lunged for it simultaneously, a desperate scramble of limbs and violence, but Jessica got there first, fingers closing around the grip, and she rolled onto her back, pointing the weapon at the man who'd terrorized her for hours. And for one frozen moment, they stared at each other. Predator and prey reversed, power shifted, everything balanced on a knife's edge. "Don't move," Jessica gasped, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the gun steady. The man slowly raised his hands, but his eyes were calculating, measuring distance, considering whether she'd actually pull the trigger. And then, in the distance, the most beautiful sound Jessica had ever heard. Sirens, getting closer, multiple units responding to the 911 call, help finally arriving. The man's expression shifted from calculation to resignation, and he slowly backed toward the rear door, hands still raised. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "I know where you live, Jessica. I know everything about you." But before he could reach the door, it burst open, Columbus police flooding into the house with weapons drawn, shouting commands, forcing the man to the ground, handcuffing him, securing the scene, while Jessica sat on her floor, still holding the gun, still shaking, still alive. Detective Sarah Morrison took her statement 3 hours later, sitting in that same living room now filled with crime scene techs and evidence markers, and told Jessica something that made her realize just how close she'd come to becoming a statistic. The man was Raymond Fisher, a serial home invader linked to 6 attacks across 3 states, 4 of which had ended in murder, and Jessica was the first victim who'd ever fought back successfully, the first one who'd survived not through luck, but through calculated bravery and the willingness to risk everything on a desperate gamble. As dawn broke over Columbus and the police finally cleared her house, Jessica stood in her doorway, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, and understood with absolute certainty that she'd never feel completely safe again, that every shadow would hold potential threat, that every sound in the night would trigger memories of those 3 hours when a stranger held her life in her hands. But she also understood something else, something profound and empowering, that survival wasn't about being fearless, it was about being smart, strategic, and willing to act when the moment came, about trusting yourself even when every instinct screamed to freeze, about understanding that sometimes the only person who can save you is you, and that in those desperate moments between life and death, the difference between victim and survivor is measured not in strength or luck, but in the willingness to never, ever stop fighting.